Father's Day and my thoughts on fatherhood. Um, it's a blessing. In my personal opinion, my personal experience, it's been nothing short of life changing. It's been nothing short of um, transformative. And I take pride in every success and failure I've had as a parent and father. I'd say parent and father because I think that those can be two different roles. So when you see people wishing themselves or wishing others, I used to get a lot of people saying, hey, on Mother's Day, they would wish me happy like Mother's Day because I was raising my girls by myself. And I used to always say, they have a mother. And I've seen single mothers wishing themselves a happy Father's Day. And I think that's just parenting in general when you can do it all. I don't think that you have to separate everything. So if I can cook as a father, I'm parenting. It doesn't mean I'm being a mother. And I can also just say that's just being a father. But mothers and fathers parent. So I say fathering, fatherhood, and parenting. But in that, my experience has been probably one that a lot of men and fathers have seen as well, which in many cases is one of kind of an underappreciation. I do recognize and appreciate the masses that uphold fatherhood for the role that it is. And I think that that's an important thing to continue to teach because it's sorely overlooked in a lot of ways. I think even in this day and age, just the contribution of men sometimes is overlooked. But I'm not really here for that. What I'm here to speak to is understanding that it's kind of become a cliche saying, but at this point, let's just run it. A lot of men don't receive their flowers until their wake. You got to start giving men their due, giving fathers their due. And this I have spoken to is a learned behavior through campaigning and through marketing if you look closely enough. Look at commercials with fathers. They're usually often just the oldest child. They are these unshaven, often paunchy, kind of bumbling male figures to this well put together woman who's keeping the household afloat despite this man doing something ridiculous. And when you look at Procter and Gamble years ago, and I spoke to it online about boycotting Procter and Gamble because they had their Olympic campaign, I believe in 2012, maybe it was 2008, that was "Thanks, Mom." Look, I understand, there's this sentiment that a lot of fathers have left people to grow up with just their mothers, things like that. Look, if you haven't heard it from your father, then ask him. If you have the opportunity to hear it from your father, ask him. Because there's probably going to be a point in time where he may tell you a different story than what you've heard. And a lot of men, through wanting to do the best for their child, have stepped back. And I know that sounds kind of strange, but a lot of times children are leveraged as pawns in child custody, in divorce, in separation. And when men typically see that, hey, my child is being really used and it's affecting them, some men will step back and say, that's what was best for the child. Other times, the courts are used as leverage. and a story can be concocted and over embellished. And a lot of men have lost not only what they've worked for to provide, but the children that they were providing for. And so now they're relegated to nothing more than a paycheck and a weekend custodian. And that's tragic. That's absolutely tragic. So when you compound the court system taking and stripping a lot of men of what they should be able to do, which is parent, and not have to pay such a high cost to do it in the form of child supports and things like that. I'm not saying parents shouldn't pay for their children, but if we're honest, we know that it's been very unjust towards a lot of men. And although I've seen it firsthand, I know that's also an anecdotal experience. But I'm sure if anybody reached out to any amount of men in their community or just in their family or in their circles, they will come across somebody who has a similar story of losing a lot. And I don't just mean the financial. I don't just mean the parenting portion. I'm talking about of themselves. This breaks a lot of men, and this shouldn't happen. Fathers should be very respected just as much as mothers do. I understand we don't physically give birth, but I also do understand that there are 18 other years to get that child to adulthood that a man can play a part as a father. So these are just my thoughts. I'm sure some will disagree, and rightfully so, because a lot of men have done some terrible things. I'm not saying all fathers are saints. A lot of men have done some terrible things, and those generally aren't the men that I'm talking about. But there is also the point that a lot of fathers become fathers as very young men, and they're not prepared. Same thing as mothers. So give the same grace and leverage that we do to women, although we don't go through something like postpartum. We don't go through potential body dysmorphias, things like that I understand. Hormonally, it takes a different toll, but we still have to leverage maybe a different level of grace. But I see and hear far too many just disparaging remarks, and I think where a lot of people and a lot of society are getting these things mixed up is you're looking to put all men in a category, but are you willing to put maybe your father, your grandfather, or that uncle, or that pastor, or that mentor? Are you looking to put the good men in your life in that same category? Because if not, it is time to start separating. It's time to start separating the men that possibly were picked and allowed to become fathers. And that's a hard part for a lot of people to deal with. A lot of men became fathers because somebody allowed them to, which means potentially they didn't have the male figure in their life to help vet and discern and make better choices. Do you see where this is cyclical? When you take men out of children's lives, it hurts them. It hurts their opportunities to see life in a scope where they have to be a little more discerning and make better decisions. I'm not saying mothers can't do that, but it takes two. If it takes two people to create a life, why would it not take the same two to raise it? And what better two? The two are what that child is going to be half of. That child is half of each of those parents. That means they're going to know that child better. So regardless if you start to dislike the other person as a spouse or partner, or even as the other parent to that child, they are still half of that child. And they're going to know, identify with certain behaviors of that child and possibly be the solution to it, to help grow, to help cultivate. But when we remove that, we leave children with a lot of questions, which is why I say, if you are one of those children and you are of the mind, ask your father. Sometimes that may be therapeutic, and sometimes it won't. But don't die wondering, and more importantly, don't let that man die wondering, because you might get some answers. Even if the answers aren't the answers to your question, you might get some answers, and it might help you see things more clearly. And that doesn't mean that you have to turn back and, Mom, how come you didn't tell me this? How come you? No, it just means that you had a conversation, because a lot of children, whether they're spoken to directly or whether it's things that they hear or whether it's just the way people act, they are given a certain idea of who their fathers are. And that can be highly detrimental. It can be highly dangerous, because you're not allowing them to see it in real time from that man. Now, I've known some very responsible mothers who did not care for the father of their children and let their children go live with them or stay with them or visit with them, because they understood, if this man is the person that I walked away from or that I separated from, in time, my children will see it because that's who he truly is, or he's going to be a good father because he was a better father than he was a partner. You have to allow your children that education, that experience, that at least opportunity, if, I say if, they're not in any danger of being abused. And when I say abused, I mean sexually, emotionally, psychologically, physically, spiritually. But we also have to understand that for a lot of women, your hurt feelings do not equate to being able to project what's going to happen as far as how that man is going to act with his children. And if that's the case, then get the courts involved. That way, in the future, your story is solidified. Because this is all what we're doing, what we're all doing is in the best interest of our children. So just telling one-sided stories, things of that nature, put it to paper, have your receipts. Because I'm not here just to wave the flag for all men as fathers. And I'm not here to tear down all women. What I'm here to do is just speak my thoughts, and let's have the reminder, let's have the refresher, let's have the introduction that we have to do things for children's needs, not our wants. And I can say that confidently, and that was the same slogan I took to court when I took my children's mother to court. And when your role is somehow diminished at somebody else's decision, okay, well, this is what I want now, and so that means you don't get to father anymore. I jumped up. Guys, the one thing that I will say is fight for your rights. Know each state. Know the state that you live in. Know those laws. Know the laws of where your children were born. Know it ahead of time. I didn't. And I learned it in a crash course. And it's what helped really propel me to a victory in court. And when I say victory in court, I don't say that in a sense of like rah-rah, because it was still a loss. It was still a loss that I had to go and take these measures, because Um, I had to, as the man of that home, even though that it was a broken home, I still had to teach. I still had to lead and be able to say, this is not what's best for these children. I don't care what you want at this point in time. This is not what's best for these children. And that's a role that is underappreciated and will not get its recognition in real time. It'll get its recognition later, and sometimes you won't even hear that you did the right thing. I didn't for years, but the effects are lasting. My ex and I, we get along now, but the effects that it had on the children last, and that's a hard place to put any children, and you shouldn't put children in that position. But going through that really woke me up. But prior to that, I had known. And again, like I said, there was a large part of time, a large portion of time, and I mean years and years, where I was raising my daughters by myself. Their mother was gone. She wasn't out of the picture, but she was out of everyday physical parenting. And when you go through that, you see how society will celebrate you differently. I would get people approaching me, giving me just random bits of advice that I've never seen a mother get, because it's almost like they don't trust that you have custody of a child or that you have a child, and that's that social construct. That's that brainwashing. Well, maybe a lot of men don't, maybe a lot of men didn't, maybe a lot of men haven't, but there are a lot of men who do, can, and have, and continue to, because they want to. And look, regardless if you are the father that goes out and just works because that's the role, and each relationship's going to be different. If you do what I did, which was stay at home much of the time, but I also did the full blown where I was working and parenting. I did where I was staying home. I did the co-parenting. I did the in-house parenting together. I've covered it all, so I feel comfortable speaking to all areas of fatherhood, and how that relates. And the best thing that you can do is to maintain your level of stability, emotional stability. Be logically minded, be measured, be stoic. And as a younger man, I would not have been that person in a lot of cases, which is why I speak to it now, because I'm in my legacy years, and passing things like this on is just where I'm at. And hopefully it helps younger guys, because when you start trying to match an energy that you're not built from, it gets bad. And think about boxing. When one's a dancer and moves around fluidly, and the other's a slugger, and they say, styles make fights, and don't fight their fight, fight your fight. Okay, well, same thing with emotions. Stay your path. And here's where it gets bad, because a lot of boys did not have men to show them how to be men, which is only something a man can do. And so they go into relationships lacking some of the fundamentals of understanding. Because if you go in and you're matching her energy, which may be more emotional than yours, and you're trying to match that, now you're not giving a place to feel comfortable. You're not giving a sense of security. And if you're panicking, what do you think she, as the person looking to you as her support, is going to think and feel? I'm not saying you can't have your moments to share your thoughts, your feelings, but you have to be measured with that. And especially in tumultuous circumstances, yelling, screaming, throwing, all that stuff, it gets you nowhere. It gets you nowhere. And again, you know, we live and we grow and we learn, which is why hopefully this information for many of you will over time turn to knowledge, and with enough thought and practice turns to wisdom that you can pass on to somebody else. But again, these are just my thoughts on Father's Day. There is what I call my goat farm of fathers. There's a handful of guys that I just absolutely am in awe of when it comes to this, sort of thing, this fathering, their role as parents, and I know they know who they are because I've told them, and that's kind of the top of my point again. Give men their flowers while they are here. Don't wait, especially you other men. If you feel or have felt or just know that there's like an underappreciation for men, we got to put away this manly notion that we're not going to say as much. Nope, hug your brothers, hug other men, tell them they're great fathers when you see them fathering in real time. When you see what's going on, when you see how well behaved their children are, when you see how happy their children are, when you see the home that they're providing, when you see them going to a job that they may or may not like to make sure that they provide, when you see them being the best version of themselves, mentally, physically, spiritually, when you see that, tell them that. And I've told these men that, because they deserve to hear that. Because I know in a lot of cases, a lot of people won't tell them that. And it's important. Ladies, it's important for you to tell men that as well. It really is. Because we understand that you are given high praise in society for being mothers. And that's great. But share that understanding that it takes two. And regardless, if you've gone through a bad experience with the children of your father or even your father himself, when you recognize a good man and a good father, tell him. Let some of that heal you as well, so you don't see all men as trash or all fathers as whatever it is that you experience. When you see it, point it out. If you had a good father, if you have a good father of your children, you're not together, speak that to other men so we know that you have a healthy understanding and a healthy respect for men. It's important. It's healing. I can tell you that firsthand. I feel good for somebody when I hear them talking about their father in a positive light. I feel good when I hear a woman speaking to the children of her father, that he's a good father. Yeah, maybe we weren't the best match, but he's grown and we've gotten along better. That's a good feeling. And not because I somehow feel I'm going to be attacked because of their bitterness or vitriol. It's simply because it's positive energy shared. And this can go the opposite as well. Guys, when you are speaking of your ex, of the mother of your children, and I say mother of children because I think baby mama, baby daddy, I think that is just something that I'm grown beyond. I've never referred to my children's mother as that, ever. And when we were going through our split, a friend of mine who I would speak to frequently about what was going on during the court proceedings, during my house hunting and everything else, he had said one day, and I'd never thought about it, he said, I've never heard you speak ill about her. I've never heard you call her out of her name or anything else, and I never thought about it that way. But that's because, as a man, as a father, my sights weren't set on her. It was what's best for my children. My thoughts were not of revenge or getting somebody back. No, I understand that things happen, people split, we go different directions for different reasons, and therefore my fight was different. Now my ex was trying to her admission and to her credit, she said I was hurt, and there was a measure of revenge. So again, that's where the stoicism, the logic, the being measured, and being the balance, even through court, got us to where we are now. I will fully take credit for at least spearheading that. Now, she had to come around at some point, and we did. So you sometimes have to play a waiting game, but you really have to just measure and understand that a lot of this stuff is not directly about you. And if it is, then you got to work on yourself. And even though this wasn't directly about me, all of it, I still had to work on myself. And hopefully, that's something that other people have seen the improvement in. But just staying on your path and your purpose as fathers and men. When I was raising my oldest, that was probably when I was by myself the most. My mother now, and I never thought about it, she said, I can't believe that you never came to me with questions or crying or saying, I can't do this is too hard. And I thought, it never crossed my mind, because I knew my purpose. I knew what I had to do. And it doesn't make me some sort of superhero. A lot of parents do that, men and women. But it's good to hear when people can recount what I'm speaking to, because I wasn't of the mind like this is something I'm going to talk about one day. This is just what I did because it needed to be done. And to have people say things like, wow, you did all that parenting without asking me for your help, or you went through something like a split without speaking ill of your ex. Yeah, absolutely. We're supposed to do that. And I understand not everybody's ready for that path, ready for that journey. But this is where we do the work ahead of time. This is where we put ourselves in a position where we say, this is tough, but I can overcome this. Don't succumb to pure emotion. A lot of times you need to respond more than you react. Respond more than you react. Response is going to be measured. It's going to be thought out. I'll get back to you. A reaction is right now. And sometimes that's not going to bide well in your favor. And, I didn't always respond. There were times that I reacted. But you got to know what you need to do. When tough times come, what do I need to do to get through this? What is necessary? And I never look at the win as, haha, I won in court. I look at the win as my children now get to see both their parents on a regular basis now. Had I lost in court, I would have moved, because that's what the whole thing was. My ex wanted to move with the children to live with her now husband in another state. Well, okay, my children don't know this man like that, for one. Two, they've never lived outside of the state that they were born in. Why would moving them, who does that benefit? It only benefited one person. And that was my ex. And that was my whole campaign. It had nothing to do with personal feelings. It had to do with the protection of these children. And that was the win. The win was utilizing the court system. I was done arguing. I was done going back and forth. Everything was email and text, because I needed those receipts, guys. You got to have a plan. If this is what's going to happen, you got to have a plan, and your plan is to collect as many receipts as possible. Do not argue in real time. Don't give them that energy. None of that. You have to just know your path, and if you don't know it, ask other men. Ladies, if you don't know it, ask other women, or ask somebody who's been through it, who's going to be able to guide you. But I say all that to say, have your plan, because everything that I wanted was simply in the best interest of my children's needs. I didn't want for myself. I wanted my children to be able to have both of their parents. Now, again, had I lost, I'd have been living in a different state now, because there wasn't anything that I was going to do to allow myself to deny my children my presence. Good, bad, or indifferent. My children may not appreciate it fully in this day and age or in this moment, like a lot of kids don't appreciate either one of their parents. But the point being is, you got to do what's right. Do what's right. And when you have something like this, when you have the perspective, I look at every day as Father's Day. And quite frankly, I don't really even celebrate Father's Day. What I look at, I don't celebrate Mother's Day. I look at Parents' Day. And this was probably going back about 10, 15 years, probably more than that now. But I started doing that because I wanted my kids to recognize that it takes two. So while we were still together, my ex and I, we generally celebrated Parents' Day more. Now we'd get little things for Mother's Day, Father's Day from our kids and stuff like that, but there were no grand gestures on those days because it was about parenting. Parents' Day, two people coming together to create life. And when you separate those, I think you have a separation in your home on some levels, because those days are celebrated much differently, and that's okay. But what we do individually, these are just my personal philosophies on Parents' Day versus Mother's Day versus Father's Day. Celebrate Family Day and create your own day. If you want to, create that, take a day between your 2 or 3 children, and what's the one day that is equally furthest from them all, and make that like your family day, or just create a particular day that's not a birthday for anybody and isn't already a holiday. Create your own day and let that be your day of celebration, because it doesn't mean they are any more of a mother by having to jam them into a busy restaurant on a Sunday, or the amount of flowers you give them. It doesn't mean that they're any more of a father based off of the ties or the tools or whatever it is that you get for fathers or things like that. No, you can do that, and you should do that every day. And when you have an extra special day, create it on your own. That way it is extremely special and particular to you and your family. The children are going to grow up remembering, October 12th, because that was that day. That was that day that we would always get together and do something. Or that last Sunday in August, right before school started, and we had our family day. It was the Johnson family day. It was the Brown, the Jones, the whatever family day. That's what we did. I know I'm all over the place here, and that's okay, because these thoughts aren't so simple as to just say it's black and white. There's a lot to it, and there's a lot that I've learned. Hopefully that there's a lot that I've shared. I'm grateful for a lot of the people who have always said that, they look at what I do as good parenting, and that's a special place to be as well. So I appreciate all that, and I hope that I can continue to, first and foremost, grow, but do myself proud, make my children proud, and the people around me to say, that's a good man, that's a good father. And through that, it's not just raising my children, it's also helping to raise the village, raise the younger members of the village. Because I've been around enough to be what do the young guys call you? They call you Unc or OG. Well, yeah. If I'm an elder in the tribe, if I'm in my legacy years, then it's not. It's a duty. It's a duty to pass on. And a lot of us didn't have that. A lot of us did. And in either case, your experiences, your lessons learned are valuable and should not be overlooked and should be shared, willingly shared. So I think I'm going to kind of leave it at that. This went a lot of places, some dark, some light, but it is all in celebration. When you think of a Memorial Day or something like, when we mark and note certain days in history, like World War II, in notable days and things like that, they are dark and light. It's celebrated for the memory of those who fought. They fought in something extremely ugly. And a lot of us do. We have to fight through something extremely ugly, or things we didn't anticipate that we would ever be a part of. And so there can be darkness to that, but there's also light, and it's also to be celebrated. So shout out the men in your lives. Shout out the fathers who maybe they're not doing it the way, I don't know, the next person would do it, but they're not supposed to. They're only supposed to do it how they can do it in their time, in their lived real lifetime, in their real time. A young man in his early 20s is not going to be able to provide the same way as your father did in his 40s and 50s. Earning is different. It's a different day. And he still doesn't have the maturity. So give him that grace to grow. And the man that may have struggled through his 30s, 40s, but was still there as a good father, a provider, maybe not of all finances, but a provider of love and support, give him his respect. Give him his acknowledgments. It's important. And I think a lot of times it has to just be said. It's important. So I'm going to leave it at that. I am always appreciative of what you leave in the chats, what you have to say on your experiences. Look, whether you are just going through it with your father, have gone through it with your father, I can tell you there were years where I did not get along with my father. And it took when my parents split and he moved away, then we started to be able to repair. But it was a two-way street. It was something my dad wrote me letters and I wrote him letters, and I flew out to see him, and then we had a much better understanding of each other and of ourselves in a relationship as father and son. And up until his dying day, we were closer. So a lot of times things take time, but what I'm grateful for is I was given that time. Either one of us could have been taken much sooner, and that would have been a tragedy for either one of us to have survived, one of us not being here. So it's important that you recognize giving people their flowers now, not because we have to be fearful that every day will be our last, but just the acknowledgement that it can happen, and that there's a lot of people who did not get to say a proper respect. Don't wait for it to be a eulogy. Say it now. Swallow your pride, because ego will prevent a lot of these things. And if you haven't worked on healing yourself because you've had a tumultuous relationship growing up, then it's time you start doing that. Start to work on yourself as well. That way you can possibly have a greater understanding or some empathy along with hearing it from your father. And it might just give you a different perspective to be able to kind of heal and move on, regardless if you do it with or without that man. You got to do it for you as well, because some of you are going to be future fathers, and you don't want to go through what your father did with his children being you. You see how it's cyclical. So break that chain, but also recognize that sometimes you just need to take a link out of that chain. You don't have to remove the whole chain. Because I'm sure for what a lot of us didn't enjoy about a relationship with either parent, there was a lot of good things that they did, or a lot of things that we didn't appreciate in the moment. But they did it anyways for us. And that's something to recognize and appreciate. So again, give that man his flowers. If he was there, may not have always been there in the way that you wanted or that we thought they should have been. But as children, trying to measure what adults are doing, we don't really understand it until we become adults ourselves. And even though it's not what we may have personally done, it still should come with the notion or the understanding that they're going to judge themselves harder in the long run. And we can't carry that weight for them or with them. Forgive them, because a lot of times the hardest thing to do, I believe the two hardest things to do, are to apologize and to accept an apology. And those both are okay. It's okay to have a struggle with those, because like I said, ego can be a very hard thing to break. Stubbornness can be a hard thing to break. And I'm pretty stubborn, so I can say that with expertise. But it feels good when you can apologize, because there's a weight that comes off of it. It feels good when you can accept an apology, because there's a weight that's lifted off of you. And it gives you the opportunity to start anew. Now, again, it doesn't always mean that apologizing or accepting an apology means that you and this person are going to go skipping off into the meadow hand in hand. It might be the last words you speak to each other, but you won't carry that baggage moving forward in your life. Lighten your load every chance you get. Don't carry weight that doesn't need to be carried. And if you don't get a chance to, if you don't ever speak to that person, if that's the weight that you do have to carry, lighten it by getting help. Lighten it by working through it. And I don't mean self-medicating or, acting in a reckless behavior, destructive behavior. Find real help. And again, put your ego aside. Because therapy is not a form of weakness. It's a necessary tool for some. Apologize and accept an apology. Apologize to yourself for not having done it sooner, and accept the apology by going and doing it. It works in all areas. It's not just about a person sitting across the table from you. Sometimes, and most times, it's going to be the person in the mirror that you need to have these talks with. But these are just one man's thoughts. So I hope this finds everybody in your place, pursuit, or beginnings of total health, mind, body, and soul. Peace, love, unity, solidarity. And yeah, for sure, share your thoughts. I'd love to hear them.